So this is going to be a very surface level explanation of why I feel the way I feel about surrogacy, because I'm not a scholar or extremely well researched, but I'll try to get to the point. So I believe that surrogacy, just as an industry, is exploitative. Like a lot of people, I used to think that surrogacy was just harmless. I thought that it was a wonderful way for couples with fertility issues or same-sex couples to have a family. I didn't really have a strong opinion on it until I started reading more about it, and then I changed my opinion. I think in the Western world, we have the image of surrogacy as being something that very wealthy couples that have fertility issues do, celebrities do, and, gay couples do. But in reality and worldwide, most surrogates are poor women from the global south who sign contracts with the would-be parents. And oftentimes those are contracts that they can't fully read or understand, and, have things in them that the surrogate mother, doesn't know about until it's too late to protect her own interests. Many surrogate mothers do not receive adequate pre- or postnatal care. They don't receive enough support throughout their pregnancy, and any health concerns that they might have after the child is born is just abandoned after they give birth, even if they have postpartum medical issues. I think that some people, if you don't know much about childbirth, genuinely don't realize this, but health concerns don't just stop after pregnancy and after you've just given birth to a child. So sometimes these surrogate mothers have, like long-term health issues from carrying the child, but the surrogate parents just say, oh, okay, well, we gave you your little $40,000, $50,000, so you're not our problem anymore. And that leaves the surrogate mother with, things like a weaker pelvic floor, hemorrhoids, nerve and tissue damage. And those things can be permanent after pregnancy, and surrogate parents don't compensate them because they already got what they wanted. They got their child. Couples from places like the United States and Canada often travel to other countries like Thailand, Mexico, Cambodia, so that they can skirt around, the sort of loosey-goosey legislation and laws around surrogacy, and take advantage of the poverty and take advantage of impoverished women in those countries who turn to surrogacy as a means to provide for themselves when they otherwise wouldn't if they weren't impoverished. Women die in childbirth. Women definitely still die in childbirth, meaning giving birth to a child is literally risking your life and potentially taking on bodily harm. I'm not extremely well researched on this point, but I have read that in some places, parents can force a surrogate to go without pain medication during labor, so that legally she has no right to pain medication during labor, and I think that's very fucked up. So much for my body, my choice, huh? And I just fundamentally believe nobody has a right to a child, not even infertile couples or same-sex couples.
Why can't we sell an organ, for example, a kidney or a liver? Organ selling is illegal because there would be individuals desperate enough to do so that would inevitably be corruption, and the market would be quickly overrun, thus driving the value of the organs down. Just as legalizing prostitution only increases the demand for prostituted women, and thus leads to an increase in trafficking and a normalization of coercion and abuse, organ selling would infringe on the dignity and safety of people as a whole. Similarly, it would see the majority of organ sellers come from the impoverished class. As noted by Marino, Ignazio R et al. In Ethical Market in Organs, market of organs is unethical under any circumstances. Any financial incentive to organ procurement, even if government regulated, must be avoided as it dangerously undermines human dignity by obscuring the difference between being human and marketing. In this same article, the editor added a postscript where they made the familiar argument that the assertion in some rapid responses that a net flow of organs from the poor to the rich would result is not a good argument against the market. Even though it is probably true, the consequence would be a net flow of cash from the richer via taxation and the NHS budget to the poorer, which is surely a good thing. How can reducing the options open to poor people be to their benefit? It is notable that those who argue that poor people should not be allowed to sell organs are in general not poor themselves. Of course, this argument mirrors choice feminism, wherein the fact that a person chooses to harm themselves is meant to negate the fact that it's harmful. In a perfect world, it would be easy to regulate and to ensure the safety and free will of those donating, but if doctors and legislators cannot ensure this for currently legal forms of organ rental or sale, What hope is there for doing so completely open market?
13 pregnant Philippine women accused of acting as illegal surrogates in Cambodia could face prison sentences after giving birth. The women were arrested in a villa raid in Kandal province in September. Cambodian authorities claim they were recruited by a Thailand-based business and assert that the women conspired to sell the babies. 7 other Philippine women and 4 Vietnamese women who were not pregnant will also be deported. Illegal black market baby selling is not on my bingo card for 2024. I did not expect that one.
This concept is explored in many works of fiction. One of my favorites is the novel Never Let Me Go, which follows a group of clones prior to their organ collection. The characters grapple with trying to create a meaningful life in a condensed lifespan, and notably, the idea that they were cloned from the DNA of undesirables, such as drug addicts, prostitutes, and others who would not be missed, is mentioned within the text. They have no choice in their organ donations and are not compensated from it. Meanwhile, in Michael Bay's The Island, the clones are fed a diet of lies to keep them in line, with a lottery disguising the harvesting of a clone for its organ. This interpretation of an organ market makes it clear that being conscious and sentient is a necessity for viability, and thus the suffering and essentially murder of the clones cannot be avoided. This, in turn, can be connected to suggestions of using comatose women as incubators, rather than using conscious women as surrogates. Suggested by philosopher and medical ethicist Anna Smajdor, she presents whole-body gestational donation in brain-dead female patients as an alternative means of gestation for prospective women who cannot or prefer not to become pregnant themselves.
Okay, so 2 things. First of all, I just got my hair done. Cut like 8 inches off and got baby bangs, so yay me. And then on the not so good side of the news things, there is a medical journal article floating the idea that brain dead women or women in a permanent vegetative state would be the perfect solution for people that either can't or don't want to be bothered with carrying their own babies. So whole body gestational donation is what they're calling, basically impregnating women that are either brain dead or permanently in a vegetative state to incubate babies for other people who just can't or don't want to be bothered to have their own. So it's a good news, bad news kind of day.
An article opposing this concept lists 3 major reasons why this idea is, quite frankly, bad. First, consent for 8 months of ICU treatment can never be assumed to be derived from consent for post-mortem organ donation. These two are of an incomparable and entirely different medical and ethical order. Moreover, the brain-dead woman is very likely to be medically unfit for a high-tech surrogacy, and the brain-dead state poses a high risk for deficient embryo-fetal development. Second, from a scarcity perspective, occupying an ICU bed for 8 months appears to be unjust. The costs for 8 months of ICU treatment are far too high compared to the cost of surrogacy for a living, selected, and healthy woman. Neither insurance companies nor prospective parents will want to pay these exceptionally high costs for a dead woman if a living surrogate mother can be hired for a considerably lower amount. Third, there is an increased risk for harm for the child to be in WBGD. And finally, WBGD risks violating the brain-dead woman's dignity and harming the interests of her loved ones. In short, there is simply no need for brain-dead women as surrogates. Of course, even this rebuttal suggests that surrogacy itself is fine, just not surrogacy using the brain-dead body of a woman. You may be asking, what's so wrong with surrogacy? Well, like any form of organ selling or renting, it is often coercive, presents health risks for the mother and child, and turns the baby into a product and its mother into nothing more than a container. The surrogacy industry is built on commodifying women's reproductive labor, and purposefully presents itself as an altruistic, safe, and quick way to make money for low-income women. For example, a surrogate in Ukraine can earn up to $20,000, more than 8 times the average yearly income. In many countries, commercial surrogacy is illegal, meaning that mothers can only be compensated for health and related expenses. In cases like Cambodia, being caught as a surrogate can result in being forced to raise the child until they are 18 or else face jail time. Because the commissioning parents never receive their product, this often presents a financial burden on women who only ever took this part to alleviate their financial troubles. Even in Western countries like the UK, surrogate mothers can get paid up to $18,000, which for women who are destitute or in desperate need of more financial independence can be life-changing. Of course, even if the child is handed over to the commissioning parents and payment is given to the surrogate, like any IVF pregnancy, surrogacy carries higher risk of complications like premature birth, high blood pressure, placenta abnormalities, and other issues. Even compared to regular IVF pregnancies, gestational surrogates are more likely to experience complications, including severe postpartum hemorrhage and severe preeclampsia than women who conceive naturally or with IVF. Babies who are more likely to be born prematurely to surrogates, although they were no more likely to have severe neonatal complications. But what happens if the child is disabled? Well, if you buy a defective product, you get to return it. And if a child is your product...
I hired a surrogate, and now I don't want the baby. This article is a fine example of how messed up surrogacy can be. Let's read. What makes a parent? If you are the reason a child is brought into the world, but you aren't genetically related, would you still feel like a father? That's the unique situation one Redditor apparently found himself in after him and his wife turned to a surrogate after 3 miscarriages and long-term infertility due to PCOS. We paid lots of money for a surrogate in order to have our own children together. The surrogate was a nice lady who took care of her body, and we got along very well. My wife and I were so excited the day she gave birth, but once I saw the baby, I knew that there was something wrong. The baby had Asian features, black hair, and brown eyes, when we are both white, blonde folks with blue eyes. We immediately brought up the issue with the doctors and asked for a DNA test. I am not the father. The man said him and his wife were devastated by the news and that the clinic had offered them financial compensation for the mix-up, but it wasn't enough. We don't care about race. We are just upset that the baby wasn't both of us. If he was white and not mine, we would still have been just as upset. Except if he was white, people wouldn't even question if he was biologically yours. The surrogate was really heartbroken as well after we revealed what happened, but can't afford to keep it as she already has 5 kids. The man of this Reddit post asks if he is a bad person for wanting to take legal action against the agency and not keep the baby. This shit happens with surrogacy all the time. A child's life, a human life, is legally contracted. Someone is an incubator for another couple. And there are multiple instances, for whatever reason, of the people who contracted the surrogate saying, you know what? I don't want this kid that I paid thousands of dollars to exist in the first place. That is beyond cruel. Surrogacy is a system that literally creates orphaned children. And now because of a business's mix-up, there is a child with no one who will love them and give them a home. And needless to say, some of the comments on this post were absolutely atrocious. I can see where he's coming from. Some people don't want to raise a child that isn't theirs, and that's okay. The wife needs to decide what she wants to do. It's not his child, so it's not unreasonable he doesn't want to raise it. He was prepared to raise his child. It's a sad situation, but he's a victim as much as the child. No, he is not. The wife is also in an awkward situation. The fertility clinic owes them millions in damages. Do y'all just see how objectifying people are talking about a human life here? This is a huge issue that I have with surrogacy. These situations happen time and time again. As long as there are ways for people to commodify children, this kind of stuff, it's going to continue to happen, and it's really sad.
One couple didn't want their surrogate baby after they discovered that the company gave the wrong sperm to the surrogate, and the child is not genetically both theirs. In 2013, a woman fled to Michigan to avoid being legally pressured to terminate her pregnancy after it was revealed that the child she was carrying would have severe health defects, including a cleft lip and palate, a cyst in the brain, and a heart abnormality.
Surrogate carrying triplets sues to stop forced abortion. So back in 2016, this woman was carrying triplets, and the dad who paid her to have the babies only wanted 2 kids, and he tried forcing her to abort one of the 3 fetuses. A surrogate mom who refused to abort one of the triplets she's carrying because a father only wants 2 of the kids filed a lawsuit. The lawsuit claimed that she is the legal mother of the triplets, which is true, and seeks custody of at least one who was targeted for an abortion. Now, after she got a lawyer and everything, the dad backed off. I can't imagine being a whole ass man thinking you can tell someone what to do with their uterus. I really can't. Surrogacy is a very shady, unregulated industry, and I think within a few years we're going to find out a lot more about this very unregulated practice.
Nobody has a right to a biological child, and attempts to present bans on surrogacy as homophobic reflect the attitudes towards childbirth, where when the mother is dehumanized as nothing more than a vessel. This is the result of treating a human being as a product that can be bought and sold. The connection between mother and child is ignored and expected to be non-existent, as if the process of building a child does not create a bond, or that severing it will not emotionally harm both involved. And this doesn't mean that adoption is inherently any better. There are typically more background checks and oversight for adoption, but that's not saying much. The famous baby Gammy case led to Thailand banning surrogacy after a baby with Down syndrome was abandoned by the Australian couple who commissioned him, though it was later ruled that the baby was not abandoned and that the surrogate wanted to keep him. It was found that the husband, Mr. Farnell, had been convicted of child sex offenses in 1999, which the judge ruled to be not a problem. In another case, the Stoffers, a group of family bloggers, adopted Huxley, who was later diagnosed with autism from China when he was 2.5, and sought adoption dissolution 2 years later, claiming they were unaware of the extent of his disabilities. When you allow the purchase of human beings, or the renting of wombs, under a capitalistic and misogynistic society, there is no escaping from unethical treatment of those involved. The process of organ selling requires coercion, infringes on the dignity and safety of the women and children involved, and ultimately will always lead to human rights violations. After all, that's what always happens when there's a profit to be made.